Hey guys, I'm back with you to talk about examples where we have various constituent structures. So the really important thing to keep in mind is that the phrase structure or the constituent structure of a sentence depends on that particular sentence, how it's being used. So we could have the same linear order of words in one sentence and have it test to be a phrase, but find that same linear order of words in another sentence and have it test to not be a phrase. So in other words, when you're applying these tests, it's really important to apply them to that particular sentence. The question we're asking is this thing a phrase in this sentence? We don't ask the question, is this thing a phrase in general? Because it depends on how you use it. Sometimes it may be and sometimes it may not be. Okay, so let's look at some examples. We have the sentence, Mary read the long book. And here we're asking about the long book. So the thing that you have in brackets, that is the only part of the sentence that you're concerned with when you're looking at constituent structure tests. Everything else in the sentence, everything outside of those brackets, Mary and read, etc., doesn't matter what happens with them. Maybe they're phrases, maybe they're not phrases. It doesn't matter. You're just looking at the long book. Okay, so you want to apply your tests. First test that you have is movement. And so you think to yourself, okay, if I were to move the long book to the front of the sentence, how would that sound? The long book Mary read. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good sentence. You know, it may not be something that would be completely natural for you to say, because there are some forms of English which will allow this type of movement process more naturally. But definitely sounds like a natural sentence. If you had instead moved the word long to the front of the sentence, so imagine you had long, Mary read the book. Now we go back to the blueberry bagel, right? Okay, if you have a friend named Long, hey Long, Mary read the book. That's a perfect sentence, but it doesn't mean Mary read the long book. Now Long is taken to be someone's name, and you're saying the name, and you're then repeating a sentence which is different from the original sentence. Okay? So be very, very careful with each word in a sentence as you're applying the rules. It can make a big difference when you are just one word off or two words off. Okay, so we did the movement test for this guy. What about the WH movement test? So the WH movement test told us that if we ask a WH question, we can answer it with a phrase. So can this piece of the sentence be answered with a phrase? So for example, Mary read the long book. What did Mary read? Imagine somebody says, what did Mary read? And you say, the long book. That sounds like a perfectly fine sentence. Number 2, conclusion. According to that test as well, you do have a phrase here. So we have 2 tests, movement and WH question, telling us that yes, the long book is a phrase. It is a constituent. And our 3rd test is the test of replacement, right? Can we replace that phrase in that sentence with a single word that means the same thing? So with Mary read the long book, what could we say? Mary read, we could use the word it. So these replacement expressions are what we call proforms. Pronouns are a type of proform, and it is a type of object pronoun. So it refers back to the long book. That makes sense. The meaning is still the same. Therefore, all of our tests are working in the same way. They're all indicating that the long book in the sentence, Mary read the long book, is working as a phrase. So you would like it to be the case that all of your tests are giving you the same result. However, it may happen that when you're analyzing a sentence, you come up with one test that seems to indicate that yes, you do have a phrase, and then you go on to your next test and it seems to indicate no, you do not have a phrase. Okay, something has gone wrong somewhere, and that's why it's good to have 3 tests. You can apply the 3rd test and see what's happening. If it tests according to the 3rd test as if it is a phrase, probably those 2 tests are telling you the correct thing. It is a phrase, and that 3rd test was somehow applied wrong. Maybe all of the words weren't included in it, or something changed in the structure of the sentence. So you can go back to that test that doesn't follow the same pattern, and you can ask yourself, well, what has happened here? Did I leave something out by mistake? Did I include something that wasn't there to begin with? Ideally, all of these tests should be working in the same way. But if you do have an instance where you have 2 tests working in one way and 1 test working in another way, you want to take a very close look at how that single test that doesn't fit in with the other tests is working, what you have done there. Usually you're going to find some sort of complication there. So all of the tests should always work to give you the same result. Okay, so let's look at the actor in the red dress is interesting. Now, we could apply movement to this. This is our first test, but movement says move something to the front of the sentence. And when you have the actor in the red dress, that's already at the front of the sentence. The actor in the red dress is interesting. If we move that, the actor in the red dress, to the front of the sentence, what would our sentence be? The actor in the red dress is interesting. In other words, the sentence wouldn't change. We wouldn't know that movement had applied. Therefore, whenever you have a situation like that, where you do a test and it doesn't give you an answer, you will always be able to apply the other tests. Okay, so movement wasn't very helpful here, but let's look to see whether the WH question test can help us. We need to form a question on the basis of the meaning of this sentence that could be answered with the actor in the red dress. So you could have something like, who is interesting? If somebody asked you who is interesting, you could give the answer, the actor in the red dress. That would be a perfectly fine sentence to say. So therefore, we know, according to the WH question test, that the actor in the red dress is functioning as a phrase here. Even though we can't do the movement test, because the movement test requires that we move something to the front of the sentence, and this guy is already at the very front of the sentence, it's impossible to move it even more to the front of the sentence. So instead we do the other test. We do the WH question test, and then we look at replacement. So can we replace this string of words with a single word that means the same thing? So the actor in the red dress is interesting. What could we put in place of the actor in the red dress? We could say she is interesting. And So she is one of those replacement words. It stands for a whole phrase. And notice it refers back to the actor in the red dress. So we have found evidence for two tests, the WH movement and the replacement test, that in fact the actor in the red dress is functioning as a phrase in this sentence. The third test, the movement test, was inconclusive. It's not like the movement test told us that no, it's not a phrase. It's just that we couldn't apply the test because the thing that we were looking at was already at the very front of the sentence. Okay? So sometimes, just because of the structure of the sentence, you're really only going to be able to apply two of the tests, and that's fine. If you apply two of the tests, they should give you the same result.